Welcome everyone to episode 59 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today I spoke with Tim Maxwell, who is a mixer and producer working out of Wrangler Studios in Melbourne. In this episode, we talked about mixing on instinct rather than relying on reference material, how his approach to recording and mixing has evolved over the years, and the importance of proper monitoring and editing before mixing. For all that and heaps more, stay tuned. If you would like to support the podcast, you can share it on your social media or you can mention it in a conversation. We want to get the word out about this podcast to everyone that's interested in producing and mixing, as well as the Australian music industry. If you could follow or subscribe to us on the podcast platforms and social media platforms, that way you can stay up to date with everything new in the world of What's That Sound. And you can also buy a t-shirt. Our merch store link is in the show notes, as well as everything else that is mentioned in this podcast. And if you would like to suggest any guests or topics or anything like that, you can send me an email. The email is podcast.whatsthatsound@gmail.com. Again, the link is in the show notes. All right, let's get into it. This is episode 59 of What's That Sound podcast with my guest, Tim Maxwell.
You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts.
What's going on? I am here with Timmy Maxwell. Welcome back, mate.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
You're on the third ever episode of this podcast.
And now I'm actually in the studio.
That's it. Yeah, man. Well, yeah, thanks for coming back and
no
thanks for
worries.
cruising
Appreciate you
over.
having
And, you know, if anyone hasn't watched that episode or doesn't know who you are, give us a quick rundown of what you do in the music industry.
At the moment I'm working with Wrangler Studios and I'm making all my records out of there. And then I work under my own business, Restless Noise, which is just mixing from home.
Yep.
So that's pretty much, all I do.
Yeah, nice.
Tone down the band stuff a bit. I'm playing in one band at the moment, but
Yep, nice. Yeah. Nice. Well, obviously it's been 3 years since that last interview. That came out in August of 2022. So
wow, that long ago.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us a bit about those 3 years and like heaps has changed for you. Like, let's, obviously starting working at Wrangler especially.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it was just like trying to like iron out the kinks and just work out how to make better records, really. You know what I mean? Just like I got heavily obsessed with mixing more than anything else. You know what I mean? Like I always consider myself a hack of an engineer, even if people tell me I'm not. I'm just like,
I feel like we've all got that.
Yeah, I feel like, most people are just like working it out. And if they're not, it's just like not fun anymore. You know what I mean? It's good to be under that pressure and stuff. But yeah, just like working with heaps more bands and stuff, still having people fly from interstate, which is great. And it's still all been word of mouth, which is crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sort of in the process of starting to advertise everything, like Wrangler's going through a rebrand and stuff, and that's when, we're going to just advertise heaps. But for now, it's just still been word of mouth, and I'm so grateful for that, which
Absolutely.
is crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just comes to me, and every time I'm like, oh shit, I got no work, it just somehow comes.
Yeah, I know.
Which is great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
love it. Yeah, well, I mean, and you've done some interstate work as well. You work with some other, artists in other studios in interstate and stuff like. So you've been doing quite a lot. Like, obviously we're mates, but I still keep track of, all the stuff that you work on and all the different bands. What's that been like to be able to do that sort of thing, work in completely new studios and stuff like that?
Scary.
Yeah.
I don't know. One of the records that I did was the Towns album, and I took my mate Greg over there specifically for that because I'm like I said, I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, I'm going into another studio with all this gear, and I'm like, oh fuck, what the hell am I doing here and stuff. Yeah. But that's when I sort of like started taking on the role of producer and knowing my strength doing that.
Yeah.
So then somebody else could focus on the engineering side of things. Yeah. It's not like I hate engineering or whatever. It's just like sometimes it's hard to be a full stack producer, even though you have to be sometimes, you know what I mean? To get going and stuff, you can't really say no to some things, or bands can't afford something. So you're just like, well, by the time you've like recorded it, produced it, and then you're like editing it, you've lost sight of the song, and that's why you need to hand it over and stuff. So if there's any way I can avoid that, then I'm going to do that. So I guess like that's one thing that I've been trying to do a lot is just like sit there and produce, know my strength, let somebody else do the engineering. And, you know, obviously that takes a lot of the stress off you as well, because like when you're having breaks and stuff and bands want to talk to you or play a game of pool, I'm just like, my brain's just cooked. I'm just like, I can't do anything because I've just been working so hard. You know what I mean? So I think that's been one of the biggest things in 3 years. It's like, trying to realize what my strength is and go for that instead. So it's like more so like producing and mixing. You know what I mean?
And obviously, you know, having Wrangler as a home base where you've got Dino, you've got, you know, now Greg works out of there heaps. It's good to have, you know, a couple of different people to work off and feed off and share ideas. And, you know, obviously, you know, you being close with Greg and him assisting you on jobs, you assisting him on jobs. I feel like that just kind of allows you to take that step back and have a breather and just be able to focus a little bit easier.
Yeah, exactly. It just takes a bit of the load off, you know what I mean? And it makes your life easier, really,
Yeah, I mean, tell us a bit about, you know, how you've helped develop Wrangler, because that's been a huge undertaking over the past couple of years. Like you guys have changed it up completely.
Yeah, so I think it was like last year in September, like I really said to Dean, I'm like, I want to like help out. I want to be as involved as possible. I like live around the corner now from Wrangler, so I'm just like, you know, I want to do as much as I can. Like we've all, you know, that they were an all ages venue for like 10, 11 years or whatever. So, and then the pandemic happened. And so it's just like, it is always trying to become a better recording studio and stuff. We just had all these dreams, and it was just mainly from turning it from like a DIY space into a professional recording studio. So we've partnered up with some ex-studio owners, which we've had an agreement to have all this amazing gear now. So like, we've just been slowly renovating and just making it as good as it could possibly be. You know what I mean? It's like taking a lot of time, but it's just getting better and better. And
What has that whole process taught you?
That it's literally not about the gear. It's just all your ear. It doesn't matter if you've got all this amazing outboard gear and stuff. It's literally just like you can make records anywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, my philosophy's always been make do with what you got. And get good at learning that. Because that is more important, in my opinion, than having 10 different compressors. Because if you can use the one compressor efficiently, effectively, you'll do way better than someone that's got 10 that doesn't know how to use 10 of them.
Exactly. I just think that it's like, if you're not a good musician, nothing matters.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
It's like the performance is everything. And that is also, you know, like something that's been drilled into me over the last few years. It's just like, you realize, it's like, oh, why doesn't it sound the way it sounds? It's like, it's like, you know, say for instance, like if you're doubling a guitar, it's just like, well, was the first performance any good? Why are we like just making things even more sloppy by adding layers and layers to cover up all that? You know what I mean? Where it's just like, if there's just one guitar track and it's played really well, that's way more authentic than just trying to layer something because Jerry Finn did it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And I think it's hard for, you know, when you're in the first couple of years, because you hear so many things. Like you just hear all these things that are like commonplace things, and you just feel like you should do it as well. And it is really difficult to challenge yourself to steer away from that, to be like, is that actually the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think like another big thing that I've learned over the last 3 years is like YouTube can be the best and the worst. You know what I mean? Like I've learned so many different ways, like whether it's the right and the wrong way to like formulate my own ways of doing things. You know what I mean? But like lately, it's just like, I've just found that there's literally nothing new to learn on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like and the thing is, like, you could get you're watching this video and you're like, oh yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. Where's your Discog? Where are your records? And then you're like, why am I listening to you? You know, just because you got a nice looking camera and you're talking all this shit. It's just like, but where are your records? You know what I mean? So that started to get into my head. And then it's like, apart from things like mix with the masters and actually learning from watching people in the studio and stuff, it's just like, I don't think there's much more to learn, you know what I mean? There's the fundamentals and you form your own way of doing things.
And I think it's like when you see impressive things, that's the hard thing, I think, for people that obviously don't have experience in it. When you're watching it for the first time or the first 10 times or whatever, if you see someone that looks impressive and seems to know, you know, has confidence, knows what they're talking about, seems to know what they're talking about, you kind of can't know whether to disagree or agree with them until you actually try it. And I think that's really the point about anything, is like, that's fine to listen to someone on YouTube that thinks they know what they're talking about or does know what they're talking about. Yeah. Put it into practice and see if they know what they're talking about. And then you can say, in this instance, it didn't work. Yeah, exactly. Or it did work and I'm going to try it again next time. And maybe next time it doesn't work. Then you can go, here's why it did work and why it didn't work. And like you said, you know, working with different musicians, people that know what they're doing, people that don't know what they're doing. Like,
there's just like heaps of people that are always saying like, oh, try this amazing, this will save your mix, this will do this, you know, all this clickbait shit. And then there's not even one audio example. It's just like you're just showing off plugins and stuff. It's just like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on forever about the problems with social media.
But I think it's really important because it's like, you know, that's how a lot of people are learning these days. And it's like, I think the days are gone of like, going to schools and doing all that. You know what I mean? It's like, you need to learn off pros or it's, I don't know.
Or action. Like you're just doing it.
Exactly. Throw yourself in the deep end. You know what I mean? Make mistakes.
Yeah. I think that's a really, I mean, it's probably the best way. Like definitely learning off other people, but I think there's no better way than just doing it yourself and seeing what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
And formulating an opinion and reflecting on it. Like, 'cause that's a huge thing. You can just keep doing the wrong thing 10 times in a row. But if you do it once, say, what did I learn from that? Do it again. Why was that different? Why was it the same? Like, I think you really have to challenge yourself and think regularly about what am I doing right and what am I doing wrong?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Were there any like key moments or key challenges that you had over the past few years where you can point to that, like, that was a turning point for me?
Yeah, I mean, I already sort of like was experimenting with this stuff 3 years ago, but it's just like making things sound good in the room before, you know, especially drums. It's just like, if it doesn't sound good in the room, then putting up 16 mics isn't going to change that. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, I usually start by having like, I'll pull up the overheads and make them sound good, make sure they're in phase and stuff, you know, just start from there and then add a mic in rather than trying to have everything all in at once. And then it's just like a phase nightmare. And especially like having like the bleed come in from the other room and you actually don't know what you're listening for and stuff, or like, you know, putting too much EQ on it and then realizing, oh shit, that's like, you know, being too compressed and stuff. I should have just, you know, kept it simple.
Yeah. So there wasn't any kind of points where you were either in a session or even just like working with specific people, you know, whether that was a band that you were working with or a colleague that kind of stood out to you as like a crucial moment for you to reevaluate.
Well, there was one time I did 72 drum takes with this guy and I ended up having a mental breakdown in the toilet, just crying. And then I was like, I don't think I can do this shit anymore.
Yeah.
That was like when I was first, getting like, I think I got off my meds and then like, I had this experience and I was just like, no, I need to get back on that because it was just, it was terrible.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been through anything that specifically, but like I can imagine that would make you go, fucking, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And what do I need to change?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just like that thing like we were talking about before, where when you're like doing the full stack producer thing, it's like sometimes you need to take jobs that are like less than desirable, and they're the ones that make me learn. Like the more and more I do what I call polishing a turd, I'm just like, that stops me from wanting to be an engineer or do stuff like that. You know what I mean?
And I think I kind of want to know, like, how has your approach to that changed, and how does the communication change with people where it's not something that you want to do? How do you approach that these days then?
Yeah, I just say I'm busy.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think there's something. The people don't necessarily have to know why you're saying no to something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think for me, it's about like saying, hey, I don't think I can't be passionate about this project. It's just not something that I don't feel I could give my all to.
Yeah.
I think that's as far as you need to go. People understand that.
For sure.
Even if they're underskilled or not that good at what they do.
It's just hard when you build relationships with those people, you know what I mean? And then you're past the point where you're just like, guys, I've been a mentor and like wanted to really help you, but like I can't do this anymore, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Because like that's one of my main things. I just want to like help younger bands and stuff, just make them feel comfortable. But
I think when you've grown up in being in bands and going through recording studios as a youngin' and stuff, like and seeing what works and what doesn't, it's hard not to want to pass that on to younger people. I think like I personally love that as well. And I don't know how people can do it if they don't have that. I feel like maybe there's like something missing there if they don't, but you know,
exactly.
everyone's different.
Yeah.
But I think you have to want to help people.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's huge. Well, you say it's not about the gear. Are there anything like any tools? Are there any like workflow changes that you have changed since? You mentioned recording drums differently and stuff. Is there any other sort of tools or workflows?
Yeah, like one of the main things that everybody deals with is like having just like cymbals just come through everything, and you always got that disgusting 3K that's building up everywhere. One thing that I started doing, which I was like sort of against to begin with, but like everything that involves cymbals, like overheads, room mics, ribbon.
Yeah.
Always ribbon now.
Cool.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I prefer starting with a darker product, really. You know what I mean? It made a huge difference.
Yeah.
It's just like actually like recording all these bands and, say, because I used to use like, U87 clones and stuff like that, thinking like, condenser is meant to be crisp for cymbals and stuff like that. But then like the more and more you mix your own stuff, so it was like, I'm still just carving out that same space. It's just like, so little things like when people put up overheads and stuff, they think they like have to be over the cymbals. Like I'm facing it away from it. It's like, what's one thing that you have heaps of in your mixes? Cymbals. You don't need any more, you know what I mean? So it's more like directed past the cymbals and stuff, because you're always going to get that.
Yeah.
You can still get the phase right and stuff, but it's just like those little things. It's like learning from mixing more so, especially your own shit. That's when you're like, okay, what are the problems? How do I solve that? You know what I mean? Yeah, that changed a lot. And then I was always pretty loose with like editing stuff, but I just started like as soon as the drums were finished and stuff, I'd like edit it straight away. But I just remember times where like I'd say I was going to do that, told the band to go away for half an hour, and it was worse. And you're sitting there just like, oh fuck, I'm such an imposter. You know what I mean? You're like, shit.
Yeah.
Like that's I don't know why that's so hard to work out, drum editing, to do it like the right way. There's so many videos and there's like not one way that's actually worked for me, but it's I had to formulate it through multiple videos to get the right thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you're also dealing with just like I was saying, you can't polish a turd. So it's like, if it's not close enough, you're going to be dealing with all these problems, and you're just like, it's just like, it could be anything like kick flams over hi-hats and stuff like that. And then you realize you don't have enough takes to like make that right. And it's just like,
Yeah, I know. No, I feel you about that. I think that really stresses the importance of getting it right in the recording. Like, like you said, sometimes it's almost impossible if the player's not good enough. But really, I think the more time that you take with that stuff, the less headaches you have.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know, for some reason, I just feel like there's always like pressure. Like, I'm an anxious person and stuff, and I just feel like I always have to rush stuff, and I've been just trying to tell myself not to do that.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But that might involve, so I was doing like a recording the other day. I spent like 6 hours working with the new gear and setting up the drums. That's what I would love, but I don't want to take up 6 hours of people's time in the morning when they expect to do other stuff or whatever. But I think like, to get the product that is in my head, you have to do that stuff. And, you know, like that's all me. It's just like usually there's like a team of people working on that, you know, the editing and all of that stuff. So you don't lose your mind over it and lose sight of the mix when you actually have to do it, if you're doing it. You know what I mean? But you just like overhear it and then all you can hear is the problems in your head. And I'm just like, I don't know. I just don't know. And then they're just like, I like the rough mix better. You're just like, oh, fuck.
Do you know what? Like when you were talking about the overhead placement before, there was one session that I was in, and the overheads, like, you know how they do that when the fucking stand doesn't lock in properly. Yeah. And then they were facing directly against the wall, and I didn't notice, and it was like the whole song. And then I listened to it, and I'm like, fuck, there's good separation in everything. Like the cymbals weren't overcrowding the drums.
They were faced away from the cymbals.
And it felt really cool. So there's definitely merit to that, like actually taking the time to position your mics where it suits the song.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like, you know.
Even just recording guitars like the other day, you know, how just like, I was using a 57 through a JCM 800 and it's just like you're literally just taking it away from the cone and then you're not going to get that 3K. You know what I mean? Just simple stuff like that. I don't need to soothe the guitars because it's already dark, and you can, you know, add some presence back into it, but like that just makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
you know?
But I think and depending on the EQ that you use as well, like actually adding stuff in is like if it's like a tone box or something like an actual EQ that has some sort of character, it can be better to add it in instead of trying to get that sound at the cone. Like, it can be better, like, because it can just add a certain character to it or a little bit of breakup or something like that. Where,
for sure.
Yeah. So like, I agree with that. Like, you know, this is where it gets hard. Is like we hear mixes. You know, Steve Albini comes to mind where like his mixes have so much character, but he's a big fan of like the fucking mic right up against the center of the cone, and that's the sound. And it's like, cool. And then you try it and you're like, yeah, I actually just don't like it.
Yeah.
Like, so
well,
it's hard to know
that's
until you do it.
It's just like not comparing yourselves to other people or trying to be CLA. You know what I mean? Like that's another big thing that I've learned over the years is literally just like you form your own sound, you know, especially when it comes to like mixing and stuff like that. It's like I've actually been referencing fuck all because like it just sends you wrong signals. Like it's fair enough to be like, all right, check if my low end's like blown out or something like that, or if my high end's too crispy. But even when you start to do that, you're listening to other songs, you're just like, well, it's a completely different song, a completely different mix. And what if I want my low end to be bigger? You know what I mean? Because the next mixer could come along and they got a huge sub, but it's just like, well, it's whatever suits the song, you know, it's like serving the song. It's not about, you know, and that's taken ages to get away from referencing because it can be like a pain. You could go in and listen to like solo all the bands and stuff and you're trying to like match the low end and do all this. And then you realize you like lost sight and you're actually just like trying to copy their mix. And it's just like, that's not what it's about.
It's not the same song.
No, exactly.
It's not the same song. And you haven't used the same gear and you haven't got the same drum kit and you haven't got all the same.
Exactly.
It's kind of, it really just can be a big waste of time. And like,
it just comes down to like, you're comparing yourself to, you know, a professional or whatever. And sometimes you're just like, I don't know what music sounds like anymore.
Yeah. And like, do I actually want it to sound like that? We've had this conversation like so many times.
One thing I've noticed like over the years as well is how like dangerous some mixes are and how I want that rather than trying to just be super clean and stuff, you know, like your Spike Stents, your Serbans and like Rich Costies and stuff. You listen to those mixes and they're just like saturated as shit and like loud and in your face and raw. You know what I mean? Whereas just like I have this, I don't know, I guess like the difference from 3 years ago is like I would have just been trying to make everything super clean. You know what I mean? Or just feeling like not injecting enough of my own character into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just being a bit more like, crazy with decisions rather than just trying to be safe because then it just ends up being boring.
Yep. And I think like to your point about like, what does it actually need? Because like when you're making decisions based on what does it need? What does this guitar sound need? What does this song need? Like what are the specific needs of what I'm trying to achieve here? When you can think in that way instead of how can I get it to sound like Rich Costie's mix?
Exactly.
You're making decisions in the moment and you're trusting your gut. And I think that obviously is super hard when you're first starting and even when you've been doing it for 5-10 years. But the more that you can do that and just back yourself and go, there's a reason why I want it to sound this.
Yeah.
I have to trust that that's the right move.
Exactly.
And then you will get that character because it's not going to sound like something else.
Yeah.
Because you're basing it on fucking what am I hearing in the room?
Exactly. But I just feel like the more you mix, you start to get your own like good place of knowing how much low end to have when you're referencing between, all the monitoring that you're listening to and stuff, or like how much high end, whereas always used to be a guessing game. So it's like I'm referencing less and less, but even if I do reference, I'm like, oh, cool. In a good ballpark because I just constantly listen to music, whether it be in my AirPods or, the headphones.
But that's, and it's another point is like monitoring how important it is to know what you're listening to things on. Like know your speakers, know your earpods if that's what you listen to music to heaps.
Yeah.
You can start to go, what's missing here or what am I needing to do to get it to sound like the way that I want it to?
Exactly, because you get used to, because like with the AirPod Pros, they got like artificial sub and stuff. So it like adds stuff that isn't there. But the more you listen to music, the more you realize what the low end's meant to be like and stuff. But I think a huge thing over the last 3 years is like translation, like is the most important thing ever, more than anything else, like translating everywhere. You to walk into someone's studio, even if it's untreated and it still translates, you know what I mean? It should sound good everywhere. Yeah.
And so how do you think that what can people focus on to try and get that translation then?
Just like having a good idea on your frequency spectrum, like making sure it's full enough, especially because most people are listening with phones and stuff, there heaps of mixes are just coming through phones these days.
Yep.
And so that's why like saturation is used a lot more for everything to poke through and stuff. It's like, there's a lot of people say the beauty's in the mid-range. Once you get that right, then it's just like the low end and the high end, you just got to get those things sitting right. But another thing that helps with translation as well, which I really never thought would be a thing, is just like the loudness. Like I just noticed how fucking smashed everything is. Like honestly, like, you have like all these people, it could be like CLA or whoever, and they say like, oh, I don't like compress things too much or I don't do that. And it's like, yeah, I get you and stuff. And then you pull in like, a wave that you've bought from Apple Music or whatever. Yeah. And it's like -4 LUFS, you know what I mean? It's like people are just like, no, loudness doesn't matter and shit. Yeah. But I've lost jobs over things not being loud enough.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, because and especially learnt that like, say if I'm mixing something that I haven't recorded or whatever, it's just like doing a test mix with somebody. If your mix is not louder than theirs or as loud, you're going to lose the job. They're not going to give a fuck about like how good the tone of the snare or anything like that. It's literally just loudness, and I've literally lost an album over that before because it was just like, a manager or something would have put up the phone and it's just like, oh, well, it's real quiet on my phone and stuff. So it's a shit mix. You know what I mean? But it's not. I just, everything is just so much louder than I could, think. And then that's just led me to a lot of clipping and stuff.
Every stage,
into that.
every stage of the mix clip.
Just like, but it's like, sort of just like, when I like reference other stuff when it's necessary, you notice one thing is the transients never really go anywhere, even if it is dynamic. You know what I mean? Like the kick's not poking through the subs in a way that's like blowing speakers up and stuff. And it's just like everything is sort of just glued. I know like a lot of that has to come with mastering and shit, but like even learning about that and sending files off, like they don't care if your mix is like -6 because it's like that sound's embedded in there and they'll do what they need to do to make it the loudness it is.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point that we should kind of hone in on is like that you need to have a picture of what you want at the end point. And I think when you bake things into the mix and like I think there's a really confusing thing that's been going around in the past few years of like, hearing that mastering engineers tell you to take off the master bus. Like, what the fuck?
Nah.
Like, ignore that. Like, straight up ignore it. Like, do what the song requires to get it to the point that you see at the end as the end picture.
Yeah,
and whether that means clipping at every stage of the mix, if that's what the sound is to get it to the end, if it's to be super dynamic, because we're talking very specifically about like hard rock stuff, like, and a lot of like alternative music, like
for sure,
and pop music especially as well.
But still, pop music's even louder.
If
you've got less, it's going to be louder.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, but you know, if you're doing more lo-fi sort of stuff and like, you know, jazzy stuff, like maybe you can leave the dynamics in. Maybe loudness doesn't matter as much, but that's the point as well, is like know what the end goal is.
Yeah.
And don't listen to people telling you have to do a certain thing. And I think, if there's a mastering engineer that's telling you to take stuff off, you got to question that. You
need
like,
a
no, this is my
engineer.
mix. This is my mix.
Yeah, but like even because I do a bunch. I've done more mastering than I thought I'd ever do. So I've been doing a lot of that as well, and like I have a few friends that, you know, pro mastering engineers that I can talk to, and it's like, oh, hey, is this too loud, or is this that, or what like target do you go for? And it's like, don't do any of that. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if one song's louder and one song's quieter. Like things are meant to change, but
that's what their job actually is as a mastering engineer.
You don't really think about that until you like actually listen to a record that's without like analytical ears. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like, going back to that with the translation stuff, is like one thing that really helped me was going down the headphone mixing route. And I never thought I'd do that. And I picked up like a $800 pair of headphones that was recommended off this podcast. And I got myself like a, what do you call it? Is it not a phono amp? I can't remember. A DAC amp. And I'm just like, what? This isn't going to make much of a difference or whatever. And it did.
Yeah.
But like one thing I didn't realize is like how important EQing headphones is. Like back in the day, people probably didn't do that because the technology wasn't there yet. But now like actually mixing through headphones, like it's actually helped me a lot. It's not something I would start with, but it's like something I'd craft the low end and the vocals with like last minute. But it all comes to mixing with the Harmon curve, which is like pretty much what, you know, a treated room's meant to sound like. And that's, so it's like taken away all the, because, you know, when I used to rock those Bayer Dynamic DT 770s, they're fucking treble cannons, man. It's just like so fatiguing. Well, it's true. It's just like, they're just like, you know, you don't hear all that information up there. Like you don't really need to fuck with that. So as soon as I like started getting used to mixing with a curve, which is super weird because you're shaving off high end and, you know, you're dipping things and you're like, am I actually going to learn this and how am I going to make that translate? And lo and behold, it translates. It's a really good tool.
Yeah, there you go. I want to know like where you're finding, you know, inspiration from these days. You know, I'm not talking about referencing. I'm talking about like what inspires you to do good work.
Yeah, just listening to music, really, just like hearing products that I want my music to sound like. You know, like I said, I've been obsessing a lot over recently, like Rich Costey and Spike Stent and stuff like that. I'm just like, how do they just make it sound that big? You know what I mean? And it usually leads to a team of engineers, a team of, you know, everybody just doing this thing. And then it's like, that's why I can't get it to sound like that.
Yeah, fair enough. How would you say that your habits, you know, daily habits, work habits, how has that changed, you know, since we last spoke? Like, has it?
Well, it has, because I've been doing a lot of mixing. I sort of just like put it out silently to the world that I wanted to be a mix engineer more than anything. And then I just started getting all these jobs and stuff. And I guess the hard part about working for yourself, and especially from home, is like you can do what you want and you need to knuckle down and do it. So unless I'm like, I need to be distracted. If I have a mix, I'm going to be there for like 3-4 hours and smash that out. But if I've just got things that aren't like due straight away or whatever, I find myself just losing my mind. Like working from home is, I don't know how a lot of people can do that. Like they're like, oh, that sounds amazing, you can do this. But like, just constantly losing my mind.
How do you avoid it then? Like, how do you like?
Can't.
Okay, fair enough.
Nah.
Yeah, fair enough.
You just got to deal with it. You know, that's just mental health for you. It just, like I said, like when I'm distracted and I have something to do, I'm just like, I'm in the zone.
Yeah.
It just
figure
helps.
out a way to get in the zone more then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, but I found it, it's a lot harder when it's not. Like when there's a session, it's like cool. It's like I have to be there at this time, get to work for 8 hours. That's sweet. I'll be able to do that. But as soon as I'm like left on my own, it's just like, I can sort of start this when I want and fuck around, and it's usually either good or bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. That's good.
Just chain smoke and listen to fucking mixes on shitty Logitech speakers back and forth.
Well, then, you've worked with obviously a lot of different people, a lot of different people in the music industry, whether that's labels as well as other engineers that you've had to mix for and stuff like that. What would you say are the biggest things that you've learned about music business, the music industry, that maybe you didn't know 3 years ago?
Well, they don't give a fuck about crediting anybody.
About what, anybody?
Crediting anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I've only worked on like 2 records that have sort of been involved with labels and stuff. And I just feel like a lot of the time they just want a certain thing, they want it to sound a certain way because that's what gets popular, and that's not what I'm about. So, I'd prefer to like work on something where like they want my influence on it. They don't want me to just like be somebody else to get the product.
Yeah. And so do you have those, I mean, you've only, say in the future, if you have more labels reaching out to you about working on certain project and then they want to have this same thing, how would you approach that? Like, would you just straight up just say, this is how I do things?
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like, I'd probably do like 2 mixes, like one where they'd probably want it to be, and then one with a bit of my influence. A lot of the times with stuff that I've mixed, I've just gone with my gut and people loved it. You know what I mean? So it could be a band that, were garage rocky and they sort of had like a lo-fi sound, and then I say to them, I think you need to step up. Like, I'm going to make it sound more like a hi-fi rock record. Just like, let me have a shot at this and see what you think. And usually they end up loving it because it's just like a bit more bombastic compared to the approaches on the last records and stuff. You know what I mean? Trying to just basically imprint my style on it.
Yeah. I think that's huge. Like, it's hard to know what the outcome's going to be, but I think good or bad, trusting that they've hired you for a reason at the end of the day. Like, they're attracted to something that you've done. Yeah. And the way that you've done it. And so
sometimes not though, which is funny. Like I literally just annoy people. I'm just like, give me a shot, throw me in the ring.
Yeah, there you go.
Do it.
That's great.
Like you won't be disappointed. I'll do a test mix. If you don't like it, fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I've had to do that because sometimes people will be like, "Oh, have you mixed anything like this?" Like, no, but trust me. You know what I mean? It's not always just rock music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I think the point still stands of like trusting yourself with the way that you do things. And of course, yes, sometimes you're going to lose a test mix, or sometimes they're not going to like the thing that you do. That's totally fine because you're still honing in on what you want and what you want to produce and what you want to mix and what you want to have as the outcome of like any job that you do. It's like you're focusing in. And I think like people think about niching in a funny way, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Trusting yourself, going with your gut, and like providing the outcome of what you think is the best way to do it, you'll start to get known for doing something a certain way.
For sure. That's harder than it seems going with your gut because you've got all these other different ideas and you're thinking of all the different approaches that everybody takes and you've got all this information. You're like, oh, shit, what do I do? But every time you go with your gut, it works because it's just instinct, Yeah. It's like the way I look at it is like if you're not mixing with like knowing what you're going to do, having some instinct and just being like, I'm going to do this for this reason. Like you're just having fun if you're not, if you're not making decisions, you know what I mean?
But I think, again, that's just another good thing to focus on is like enjoying it and just having fun with it because I've certainly done that over the past 5 years with podcasting, with mixing, with producing. It's like, at the end of the day, if you're just not enjoying it, what are you doing? Because anyone can do what we do at the end of the day. Like, I mean that in not a specific, they can't produce what I produce. I'm saying if you learn the skills, anyone can do what we do. And everyone's got different personalities. We've got different interests and stuff. If you're doing something that you don't enjoy, you're just going to be hating life.
Yeah.
So really, it really is important to me. And I think my advice would be just like really focusing on stuff that you enjoy.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
and you'll just have a better time. You'll do better work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
for sure.
Yep. This will be an interesting one. What would you say to the person that I interviewed, being you, 3 years ago? What would you say to that person?
Chill out. Oh, I don't know. Hey, well, get a better setup to mix in. Like, I was literally mixing next to a main road.
Yeah.
With trucks going past on Williamstown Road, and just like it was the worst setup ever.
Yeah.
And somehow I made things translate and got all these mixes out of it.
Yeah.
But I just be like,
Yeah.
dude, look at your setup, get something better.
Yeah. And so what does that mean, like, specifically? Like
Mixing in a room that doesn't have trucks going by.
yeah, anything else? Just like focus on good speakers, good room.
Yeah,
setup.
focus on the performance more than anything else. You know what I mean? Don't just try fucking patch things together and half-ass things, because it's not going to be the product that I'll be happy with.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's different when you work on your own products, like where you're doing everything and stuff. But like a mix should only take like, to me these days, like 4 hours, and then like a revision the next day or something on fresh ears, you know what I mean? But it's like back then I would have just been spending months on something, ruining it because the editing wasn't done properly. It's always problems that stopped me from making a product sound the way I wanted it to sound.
Yeah. That's
so
awesome.
that'd be another thing. Just like edit your fucking drums, dude.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yep. Yeah. No, I love it. I love that. That's such a good point, because like a lot of the times when you don't realize what you're fighting up against, and then you actually take the time and you do something right the first time, and you go, fuck, that was easy.
Yeah. You just try.
Obviously, everyone's been telling me to do it.
Yeah. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You try, think that like there's going to be, because that's the thing. It's like what I was talking about with the YouTube stuff. I used to listen to a lot of those people, and, you know, you see these clickbait. It's like, oh, fix your mix in seconds and stuff. It's just like, no, it's got nothing to do with those EQ moves. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with the performance, things being tight, and then everything else is going to be super easy for you.
Yeah, facts. I love it. Well, then what things about what you do continue to make you like excited? You know, what do you look forward to when you walk into the studio every day?
Mixing or recording?
Let's start with mixing.
Yeah. Probably just getting pumped on like all the current mixes and stuff. I usually listen to like a latest songs playlist and a rock playlist or whatever. And I'm always just looking for who's credited and who's coming up in the world and stuff like that. I want to stay modern, and still maintain my authenticity at the same time, you know what I mean? So like I get real pumped on hearing how high end is these days, how low end is these days and stuff like that, you know? Because you could go from someone like Rich Costi to Zach Savini and it's a completely different world, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's just, I've sort of gone past the point of like being excited about like using new plugins or having this new thing, you know. I'm more excited about just pulling up the faders and making the mix sound great from just a balance, you know.
And it's funny that like you bring up the point about the different producers / mixers, like it's so like they're worlds apart, like even if they're in the same game, like you just, and that really stands out to me is like, at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter about that specific sound. Like in some genres, it does matter more than others. I would say metal in general, like there's a specific need to have this over-polished, like crystal clear, like, but in the world of rock music in general, you can listen to, like you said, Zach Savini, and it's like this fucking hyper, like over the top thing. And then,
but it's something new.
But it's something new. But my point is like comparing them, they're worlds apart.
Exactly.
And so that really, I like to think of that on a really regular basis is like, don't try and achieve this ideal. It's just like, bring your identity. And like, we've been talking about this the whole podcast, but it's but it really like you can go from one person to the next and like sound completely different. So that doesn't matter.
That's the thing. And each song's different, you know, one song will require less low end and one will, you literally just serve the song. That's way more important. You know what I mean? Because as soon as you chuck on an album, whether it is like two or three different mixes or whatever, even if they have different songs on that album, they all sound completely different. You know, they're not like always going for that same low end or that high end. They just serve the song. And, you know, because I used to think when I was like mixing albums and doing stuff like that, it's like, I remember there was one time I was working on this album and I literally put it all in one session and made everything sound exactly the same. Why? That's not what records sound like. You know what I mean? One thing could require a different drum sound or vocal sound, but you know, that's what you learn. But the funny thing is, until you have that like critical, analytical mindset, you never used to think about that when you were listening to a record. You know what I mean?
No.
You put it on and everything's different.
Yep. And you didn't know that it was different. It just sounded fucking awesome.
Exactly.
And you loved it because you love the music, really. At the end of the day, you love the music. Yeah. Obviously, everyone's input has an effect on what it sounds like. But I think when you're young and you're not in this game, it's just music.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to have that. Like
sometimes I hate having those ears because you listen to something that you thought sounded good and then you're just like, oh, this sounds terrible and I can't listen to it anymore.
I know. Yeah, absolutely. Can definitely relate to that. What about then producing and recording? Like what excites you about that?
Probably just trying new techniques and trying to further myself in like, getting it right at the source, you know. I mean, like everybody says that, but it's easier said than done.
I think that's going to be the internal battle.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it really is, you know, and like the problem, like we were talking about before, by using like ribbon microphones and stuff, is eliminating that harshness in the room. You know what I mean? Because like you could have this like these amazing mics or whatever. It's like, but they're being used at like East-West Studios with huge high ceilings and all this beautiful stuff. It's like, why doesn't mine sound like that? So that's when you need to cater for your room, and that's why I think that like. Using ribbons and stuff, just making everything darker to start with is better than it just being like harsh. You know what I mean? Yep,
I love it. What are you going to be we kind of answered that in that question, but I guess do you have any other focuses for the next, you know, short term / long term, like next 3 months, but next year or 2 years? Like what are your focuses going to be?
Yeah, I really want to focus more on mixing, do some more mastering and stuff. I've got a bunch of projects coming up that I'll be producing and engineering, but I almost like at some point just want to be able to just be a hobbyist with engineering, get somebody else to do it when I'm producing, and like you were talking about before, have fun. You know what I mean? Because it's like as soon as I take the stress out of it, it's like you get a better product and you can actually have fun. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with like the idea of trying to make it in a band and stuff like that. You lose all the fun. And it's the same thing with engineering. It's just like, I just want to do this for fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So that'd be the goal for sure.
Yeah, sick. Last question then. What advice do you have for anyone? So first of all, producers / engineers, mixers, songwriters.
Yeah.
In the first 5 years, and then secondly, for any artists that might be checking out this podcast.
Yeah, don't just get sucked in by plugins straight up. Like you don't need any of that. If I could tell myself that, it's literally just like learn the fundamentals. I know the stock EQs may look ugly, but they're all doing the same thing under the hood. You know what I mean? The only difference is color or something if you were to use some analog thing or whatever. So it would be like, learning the fundamentals and getting it right at the source.
Yep. And then for artists?
For artists, learn your fucking parts.
Yeah.
Practice your fucking instruments.
That's it. Yeah.
Come on.
Yes. It really is as simple as that when you come down to it.
You got all this time, you pay for it. I don't want to waste your time.
Yep,
you know
absolutely. I mean? I love it, man. Anything else that you want to share while we're here?
Where's my U47 FET? What's this shit?
You use these mics.
Yeah, well, not for vocal, mate.
Oh, well. Sounds fun.
Thanks for having me, bro.
All good, brother. All right. Well, thank you to you guys for checking this podcast out as well. Obviously, spread the word. We want everyone that's interested in this shit to hear about it. Awesome guests like Timmy here. We will see you next time on What's That Sound podcast.
Thanks for listening to What's That Sound? Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.